Let's bring in our panel. Ed O'Keefe is a CBS News political correspondent. Michael Graham is a CBSN political contributor and conservative columnist. Caitlin Huey-Burns is a CBSN political reporter. Leslie Sanchez is a CBS News contributor and Republican strategist. And Antoine Seawright is a Democratic strategist. Welcome to you all. I don't think we could fit anyone else at the table here. Ed, let me start with you, though. The White House says that the president will attempt to foster a theme of unity tonight. With the current political climate, how challenging might that be?
Super challenging, Elaine. He can't even get Democrats to talk to him about drug prices in an effort to try to control those prices. So that should show you how difficult it really is right now for him. And this attempt at unity comes after Democrats rebuffed his invitations to meet during the shutdown. Remember, he was trying to meet with a collection of freshman Democrats about possibly working with Republicans on a deal. There is no appetite among Democrats for cooperation with him on most issues right now, because they don't see any incentive to do so. He remains deeply unpopular among Democratic voters. And frankly, Democrats don't want to fall down the wormhole that many Republicans have fallen down for the past 2 years, where you begin to support a specific policy position or proposal that the president one day tweets about and then 2 days later reverses course. So, you know, for now at least, there really is no incentive. The only thing I can think of in the last few weeks where he has earned bipartisan praise is for what he's done with Venezuela and recognizing the government of Mr. Guaido as opposed to Mr. Maduro. That is probably the only thing that sticks out in my mind as having earned significant bipartisan praise in recent weeks.
Caitlin, let me turn to you. What about policy? Can we expect the president to introduce any new policies?
Well, we've been hearing from previews that he wants to talk about infrastructure, which has been something he's wanted to talk about apparently for the past 2 years and hasn't really gotten anywhere. Also, as Ed mentioned, drug pricing. But remember, even on those two issues, the parties are still very far apart. When it comes to something like infrastructure, there is a very stark divide between the two parties about how to pay for it, whether and how much the government should be involved. We know on the cost of prescription drugs is a bipartisan issue in terms of the voter base. This is something that people really do care about. But you know, kind of going back to the central premise of this, which is that Democrats also feel emboldened by the past round of negotiations. They feel emboldened by the midterm elections, and they're heading into another general election, presidential election, and they're in the middle of a primary. And so opportunities for bipartisanship on policy are very slim. But we're also kind of really paying attention tonight to see what the president says about that border wall, whether he will, in fact, move closer to calling a national emergency.
Leslie, if you're a Republican, as I know you are, what do you want to hear from the president tonight?
I love how the Western Hemisphere and Mexico and kind of all of Latin America is becoming a big part of the president's, you know, kind of lauding his success when it was part of what he was railing against to win. But on that issue of, and I think Caitlin's got it right, when you're talking about border security, the president has an opportunity to do something bold with comprehensive immigration reform. Those are words you never put together on the Republican side. But if he does something very strong and says, I will support legalization, or not a path to citizenship, but legalization for some of these DACA students, you know, there is a way where it puts the Democrats in a position it's really hard to walk away from, because that's something they've ultimately championed and we have together, which is the conservatives that we're never going to allow that to happen. So what I'm hearing from a lot of like establishment Republicans is they see a really good opportunity here, but it would have to be very bold, and they think it could change the conversation going into the rest of the week and as it layers on border security.
So CBS News chief congressional correspondent Nancy Cortez spoke with Senator and 2020 hopeful Kamala Harris, who's bringing a furloughed air traffic control worker as her guest tonight, and she explained why.
Whatever decision policymakers and leaders in this place called Washington, D.C. make has a direct impact on real human beings. And the decision to shut down this government for the sake of a vanity project called the wall was not without harm.
All right, so Antoine, what message are Democrats trying to send with their guests tonight. We should also mention you are a newly minted CBSN political contributor. It's great to have you here. But what's the message here?
I think Democrats want to speak to the hearts and minds of the American people. This longest shutdown we've ever faced in our country's history. While we are back to normal in some regards, there's also people who are still hurting from the shutdown. If you look at the millions of contractors who are impacted by this, if you look at local economies, if you look at everyday people like myself who travel through airports, who had delays and so forth, those things are real life scenarios that people face every day. And I think Democrats want to make people understand this is not about whether it's about Trump or whether it's about the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It's about people's lives and the families are impacted, whether they visit a food bank or whether they had to go out and, go pick up nails on a construction site just to feed their families for the days they were out of work. It's real life, and I think that's what Democrats want to portray by some of their guests. But I think what they're looking for tonight is the tone of this president. The president's tone and his delivery in his speech will say everything about how we go into negotiations, one, to keep the government open, but two, to deal with this massive animal on the table called immigration. I think his tone tonight will say a lot about it.
Michael, what are you going to be looking for tonight?
Yet another State of the Union address where there's lots of jumping up and applauding and eye rolling, and then 24 hours from now it'll be totally forgotten because Trump is going to stay Trump. He's going to keep the Trump tone, even if he's given a couple of speeches in the past. Remember the last State of the Union? People are like, oh my gosh, look how presidential. By the way, 14 Democrats refused to show up for the last one. Only 4 are sitting out this one. If the president is taking my advice, Mr. President, every sentence should have the word economy in it. There's a new poll out. 80% of Americans want to hear the president talk about the economy. 80% of Democrats want to hear him talk about economy. His economy story is a fantastic story. The same time you're talking about people struggling. Last month, 300,000 jobs created. Nobody saw that happening. This economy is off the hook. Why he would talk about anything else is beyond me.
The jobs doesn't mean upward mobility. Be
Yes,
clear.
it does. In this economy, it does.
It does not in every scenario.
Well, we are going to have so much more time. We have hours and hours until the State of the Union here. Thanks to all of you. We're going to check back in with you later tonight.